We are live, folks. So, Norm, when you went hiking the other day, where'd you go?
Well, we hiked to several places. We drove out first and stopped off in the Badlands, and then the Black Hills, and then we went to Rocky Mountain National Park, planning to stay there for a week, but we hiked the first day we got there, and then they were predicting 7 to 14 inches of snow. And we woke up in the morning and there were 6 inches on the ground and more continued snowing and more was forecasted with rain by the end of the week. And we've hiked in snow and rain. If you have a choice, that's not so good. So
they've done that.
So we went back to Black Hills and we spent the rest of the week hiking in the Black Hills, there's some great hikes there. So we had a great time.
That's excellent. I love that type of trip.
And it was kind of fun just being on the road and plugging in something on the playing different things that we had on our iPods, and a great time. It was good to be getting out of the house, knowing that colder weather is coming and our ability to do things outside is going to be a little bit more limited.
Yeah, for sure. I'll turn it off.
What are some of your hiking trips that you've gone on that you liked?
We like national parks. So Yosemite and then Utah is probably my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having moments where I can't remember the names. Bryce. What is the one?
Yosemite's a great place.
On Utah. Oh God, it was beautiful.
Canyonland. There's four national parks there. There's Canyonlands and Arches and Bryce Canyon and Zion.
Zion.
Uh-huh.
And then some friends and I hiked the canyon, Grand Canyon,
a
couple years back, down and back in a day.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
It was, I got a little sore. All right, well, we have a majority here, but our fearless leader are not. So 7:01.
I am here.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I'm on audio. I'm going to be traveling, so I can't Zoom or come in.
Okay, so you're one of the call-in numbers. Merritt's one of the call-in numbers, and you're one of the call-in numbers. Okay, well, welcome all. Do you want to get started, Dan, since you're going to be traveling, and I don't want you doing a lot of organizing while you're driving?
That would be, well, I'm just getting a ride to the airport, but...
just the agenda and minutes to start with?
Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda.
I second. Thank you. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Motion to approve the minutes. Norm, would you make a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Approved.
Okay. Thank you. Merritt, do you want to take it away? Oh, you're muted. I'll mute you. There you go.
No, I think I have to do it with my phone.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Hey there. I want to let you know before we start the meeting that we have tree removal people coming today, and they're going to be taking down with a crane two 110-foot white pines that are right outside my window here. And they don't want me to be in the wing of the house where they're working in case something goes wrong and it falls on the house. So I'll be moving to a back bedroom at some point when they seem to be getting work done. I'm hoping I can make it through the meeting without moving. So, FYI.
Sounds good.
So Stephanie, you are working minutes, and then share screen.
Okay. Do you want me to pull up the rationale? Which do you want me to pull?
Let's start with the rationale.
Okay.
So thank you. A number of you were able to get into what I call the rationale document, and that's where I'd ask people to look at each of the goal statements and try to articulate in your own words. Can you make it a little bigger, Stephanie?
Let me get rid of this pop-up window too.
For everybody to kind of say in their own words why they felt each goal was important or justified. Why do you support the goal, and then do you think there's any data or information that could help with the goal? And so if we scroll down, we can see that a number of people provided comments. So let's look at goal 1, for instance, and you can take me out of there, Stephanie. So Steve and Stephanie, I think Steve, Stephanie, Norm, Tom, Janet,
and Bernadette.
Were able to provide comments, which is great. So I just compiled all of these this morning. So if we look, for instance, just at goal 1.
And take out mine. I was just trying to incentivize folks.
Okay, well, go ahead and remove those so we can see. So let's just take this example of Steve's comment on goal number 1. Met Council's identified a forecasted need, which due to lack of federal funding has been reduced to an achievable goal of 992. Maxfield study indicated a need of 1,982 units, with a number of those being senior. So Steve there is giving an example of providing kind of data that justifies the reason that more affordable units would be needed in the city. Norm then, in his comments below that, you can see that he is expressing not the data, but more the relationship between having affordable housing and the community. So for instances, having housing that people that work in the businesses in Edina can live in. So those are the different types of statements. It can be data, a values statement, kind of a why this would be good for Edina statement. Janet said affordable housing and workforce housing are important for a thriving economy. And Bernadette cites socioeconomic diversity and allowing young families and older people and fixed incomes to be in the community. So that is a terrific example of kind of the range of reasons that you have articulated around affordable housing, and that those are often the most cited reasons. So what this is going to do is then when I am structuring the report, instead of having in my own head kind of a rationale for affordable housing, which is informed just by my own life experience and profession, which has a certain sort of tone to it, I can take the way you all have expressed rationale for these goals and use that mix of voices to create a narrative that I'm hoping reflects where you are at as a task force. So with that, I'd like to hear from people who did it, or maybe people that looked at it and didn't do it for a certain reason. If you thought this was helpful, or if this makes sense to be doing this exercise to help craft the report.
I think it is very helpful to articulate in someone like me from a personal point of view, it's like injected in there, but I know I didn't develop mine very well. I have somewhere where I had written a comprehensive explanation of how economy is affected when we don't have housing for everybody. And I like to reference like there's a company that moved into Thief River, but there was no workforce housing, and we really did have to struggle attracting employees there in Thief River. So it's just an example of saying when we don't have housing, we can also discourage some businesses from moving into our community, which solidifies the position that both housing and the economy go hand in hand. But I know I have not formulated my point very well. And I was looking for somewhere I had written it well, but I couldn't find it very late last night. But I will look for it and put it in a comprehensive way. Thank you.
You, Steve, going to say something? Oh, Tom had his hand up too. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say that I got kind of busy with some other things, but hopefully I will add some more to this whole exercise. But I thought it was good. It's a way for people to bring out other ideas. And like you pointed out, Merritt, everybody has a different life experience and a different thought process. So hopefully we can continue to develop this document. Am I correct, Merritt?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Steve?
Oh, I thought it was a great exercise. The only frustration I had was trying to find the detailed strategies that go underneath each of the goals. One of the things that, Stephanie, I'd like if we could put the dates on the documents in the share drive or in the Google Drive. Because what I found was all of our documents have labels, but they're not dated, so it's hard to tell which is the most current version and which might actually be the last version. So that would be helpful. I took the goals and strategies as of August 19th, and I found that was, I thought, a little bit cumbersome. I think there's a simplified later version.
So you were trying to find a document that had the strategies as well.
Yeah, the goals and strategies, just so I could see what was underneath the goal.
Yeah. Okay. And what was it, just briefly, when you were looking for the strategies, were you wanting to look at them and think about rationale for them as well? What were you?
No, I just wanted to remind myself what were some of the strategies that were encompassed underneath that goal so that I could make sure that I understood what the intent of the goal was. Just as a trivial example, and you'll see that I made a note about this, we had goal 7, investigate land use planning, which I said was sort of a poorly stated goal, just in terms of the language of it. That was more of a goal for the team itself as opposed to a goal for the report. So I've now said it should read something like increase housing diversity by changing land use regulations, which I think captures more the spirit of the strategies that were identified underneath that goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're going to have, as we start to articulate these rationale and organize the report, there's more work to do with the goals and strategies. For instance, in the section that I did that sample chapter for, that was a goal that we had only created one strategy for.
Yep.
And the strategy itself is really just a longer statement of the goal. As opposed to being a strategy. So there are places where we may need to articulate more strategies. Or Steve, I want to come back at some point. We'll put in the parking lot now. Something you'd brought up in a comment about whether we need to do some additional consolidation for the report. So we'll get to that when we talk about report structure.
Yep.
Anyone else want, Norm, did you want to share something? You'd put quite a bit into this.
Well, I guess my question, first of all, thanks for everybody for putting in your comments. And I agree that it's always interesting to understand how we each of us come at the topic from a different direction based on our interest, life experiences. So thank you for all that. I thought that was very helpful. My question to you, Merritt, is maybe we can talk a little bit about, now that we've looked at some samples for these goals, how do you expect to continue, and what kind of support do you need from us moving forward?
That's a great question. I think we should talk about that with when we go to the formatting for the report, which we can do in a moment. As I dig into these, it'll probably become clearer. But let's talk about that with format. And let me just see if anybody had last comments. Dan, what were your thoughts on this? I know you hadn't written any comments down, but.
I've been packing the car to go to the airport while you're talking, so.
Okay.
Barely hanging on. So just please continue. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Where are you going, Dan?
To Denver to visit some family members, and then we've got friends in Vail that invited us for the weekend.
That sounds very nice. Okay.
It's going to be fun.
Well, I expect you to put down your reactions to the different goals, your rationale while you're sitting in a hot tub in Vail.
Okay, or out hiking. Either one would probably be convenient.
Okay, yeah. While you're hiking, you can dictate into a phone. Okay. We'll let you off the hook today. Bernadette, do you have anything down? Or do we have Bernadette on today?
Yeah, she's on mute.
There she is. Yep.
She might be getting coffee or getting a kid set up at school.
I think she's packing to go to Vail as well.
Do you want me to go to the report?
First go to the chapter that put together. The sample chapter.
Yep.
And that would be in the folder.
Are we coming back to the exercise we were just looking at? Because most of us haven't seen everybody else's comments.
Oh, yeah, we can certainly take time to talk through those.
Right.
I think that might be a good idea. Yeah, bring it back.
Okay, I'll share.
Actually, that might be a good way, Steve, to kind of get at talking about the structure for the report. So why don't you, before we dig into these, just share what you would put in a note to me, and that's something we can keep in mind as we go through each of these.
I think the two thoughts, one was that we can consolidate some of these goals, but two, I think that I'm not sure that this format of going goal by goal creates as easy to understand overarching narrative. It sort of creates individual narratives that support each of the goals. And that may be a little harder for the reader to track through. But I haven't come to a final conclusion on which way I think is the strongest. I like the idea, as I said in my note, that this follows the structure that Norm recommended of providing findings as a way to give people an understanding of how you got to the strategy that you're recommending. So the idea of doing findings and then strategy works very well, and the same concept works well here, where you provide your narrative and then explain the goal. So I think it's a nice format, but as I said, you end up with as many different narratives as you have goals, and it may not be as cohesive as having an overarching narrative that starts the whole thing, and then you just list the goals and the strategies under the goals. So I'm still not decided on which format I like best.
Okay, so I just ask everybody to keep kind of the formatting in mind as we go through each of the goals, and just kind of briefly touch base on how people are feeling about them. And do we want to see the strategies as well as we go through these, maybe in a side-by-side document? Or should we focus on goals?
Let's focus on this.
Okay. All right. Why don't we go back to goal number 1, Stephanie? And you can take my comment out. So Steve, you had provided a couple of comments that are providing kind of the data case for needing more affordable and attainable housing.
Exactly.
And Norm, you were putting in, we scroll down a little bit. Do people want me to read what these say, or we just look through them ourselves and kind of talk about them?
Can we talk about that first comment Steve put in?
Oh, okay, yeah. So it says, according to the Maxfield study, there were 7,994 affordable homes in Edina, or about 37%. The vast majority of these were naturally occurring affordable housing. And of those, 20% were owned and valued at under $300,000, with 2,300 of those being in multifamily units and 1,900 being in single family. There's a concern that market conditions are pushing up the price of the naturally occurring affordable housing. There are also 3,000 general occupancy affordable rental units and 393 affordable senior. So Joe, what did you want to?
Well, so isn't this, as I read this and understand it, 37% of homes in Edina are affordable.
Today, yes.
Isn't that a pretty strong number?
Yep. That's why I put it in there.
Yeah.
I think I don't think anybody believes that those homes that are currently valued at under 300,000 are going to stay that way. That their prices are going up so fast that that number is rapidly shrinking.
Right, because these aren't designated affordable, they just happen to be affordable, and that can change.
I've just added some notes that you can ignore, which is why they're in red, is so some of these are condos, because the Come Home to Edina program, a lot of these affordable units are in the condo market, where they're $170,000 for a 1-bedroom condo. But it's balanced against the median single-family value of a house is $450,000. I mean, if you can extrapolate it out, and a lot of the 450 and below homes have been acquired, torn down, and made into 1 million plus homes. So that's where the fear is of losing the affordability. So there's a lot of data along.
So does Edina track data on loss of NOAA housing?
Trying, man.
Is it good enough data to use in the report?
No.
And how many were condos? What number is that associated with?
2009.
Stephanie, I have a question about the condo market. When they're listed, and I've seen these, they're 150,000, 175,000, whatnot. But then the association or monthly charges might be $500. Is that still truly an affordable unit if one is paying a mortgage and those monthly payments? So, dive than we want to take.
I'm seeing all that information when doing the Come Home to Edina. I don't get all that information.
Okay.
To Edina, and those prices change. Those fees change over time. I don't have all that.
There's a couple of ways to look at this information. I think Joe's expressed a little surprise at the number 37% were affordable. But I think that also points out that Edina is not the sort of monochromatic single-family homes community that some people have in their heads. It already is a very diverse community. It has a lot of affordable housing. So it's not like the things that we're trying to push forward are a radical change. They really aren't.
Right, we're trying to maintain along this line.
Yep.
Steve, I would also think that within affordable housing, though, many of these units are for people that perhaps many of these condos are appealing to elderly who may have a lot of assets, but their income is low. I'm just wondering, though, how much for the very low income, say people have 50% or below, and how many of these units are available to young people or young families who don't have assets and they're just starting out in the job market?
I don't know if we're going to be able to get all of that, Tom.
Might be helpful to break down the 37% at across 30% of AMI, 50%, 80%.
We do have the breakdown available. And as would speculate correctly, there are fewer at the below 50% level, that most of the homes are going to fall between 50% and 80% AMI.
Yeah. So Joe, was there something else about Steve's comment that we hadn't addressed that you wanted to talk through?
Norm's been trying to talk for a few minutes now.
Okay, I can't see everybody.
It appears to me that all of our focus has been centered on the Metropolitan Council allocation of some 1,800 units. Steve, is the implication of what you put down that instead of focusing all of our attention on the 1,800 units, might it be more profitable and effective to have more of a bifurcated focus on not only making the 1,800 new units, which have in some cases a limited life, but rather focus on this much larger number that's currently existing? Is that your focus?
Well, I think the issue is that the way the Met Council looks at it is they try to determine what new housing units do you need to accommodate the growth that we foresee in your community or across the metro area. So they don't really care what you've already built. They're saying that's there, that's great, glad to have all that, but we need to look at how much more do you need? Because if you simply preserve what you have, you're falling behind every day. You've got to be looking actively at adding more in order to accommodate the growth that is coming your way. So, you know, we could spend a lot of energy trying to preserve the existing, and we should. But preserving the existing is challenging for a number of different reasons. And we don't want that effort to take our eye off the need to get new units built, because that's also very challenging.
But for every unit we don't preserve, does that imply there's another unit we need to build new?
Absolutely.
So the goal really isn't 1,800. It's 1,800 plus whatever affordable housing we're losing.
Well, yeah, and the affordable housing you're losing is obviously dependent on people making a decision to sell that house and making it available on the open market, where suddenly it becomes repriced. If someone is in their early 80s and they're going to live to be 94, we don't have to worry about that house for the next 10 years. So it's difficult to know how much turnover there is in that, the ones that we're trying to preserve. And as you know, we have a goal of trying to preserve existing affordable housing. And we definitely should focus on that goal. That's a challenging thing to do. It's to happen naturally. Things just move slowly in the world of housing. It takes a long time before that housing becomes so run down that somebody's going to try to completely. The same thing is true in single family homes. It takes a long time for homes to turn over.
Joe, did you want to add anything?
Well, I think the idea of preserving this type of housing, well, first of all, I think the idea of communicating that Edina is diverse today, or has diversity in its housing market. And then I think the idea of maintaining this diversity is really important. You know, I think about, it's a lot easier to keep a customer than to get a new customer. Does that apply to housing? Is it easier to keep some of these? Are there things we can do to keep these houses affordable and begin to focus on that? But just outlining that we are a diverse community already, I think is really important.
Yep. Just to add some more information, more numbers. When we read the housing chapter, it lists that in 2016, we had 3,600 units that address the market of 50% AMI or lower. When Maxfield redid their study in 2019, that number had dropped to 1,000. So in the space of 3 years, we lost 2/3 of the housing for people at that 50% mark and below.
If we, at that rate, we'll never catch up to the need.
The good news is that most of those moved into the next bracket, which is 51% to 80% AMI. So we didn't completely lose them. They just appreciated enough that they were no longer affordable by the people who need subsidies. But it is a rapidly changing market.
All right, were there any, if we look further down, wondering if there are any other comments we want to touch on. And the crane has arrived early, so just again, as soon as I start to be in danger, I'll jump up and look.
I've got a couple comments. One, I think it's a mistake to lose sight of the fact that the city's intent might be to maintain affordable housing units, but most likely every owner of those units doesn't want to maintain affordability. They want the value of their home to go up.
Yeah, and I think the comment that Dan is making is correct. That's how the market works. And what you would hope is that compensation being offered to people who are buying those homes is keeping pace with the rate at which the homes are going up in price. And as Stephanie has provided data for, we see that wages just aren't increasing at the same rate as housing value. And so while the market forces will continue to drive up prices.
Steve, I didn't hear the thing you said. What's not increasing as fast as housing values?
Wages.
Well,
people's salaries.
Yeah, but that's such a generalized statement. I don't think it's a tremendous value. Obviously, the income of the people buying the houses is sufficient to obtain the mortgage. So those buyers are in a position to buy those houses. What you're saying is that a larger percentage of households are unable. So take a home in Edina, 500,000. I'm going to make some numbers up here to make my point. Let's say a $500,000 home. Let's say 15% of the people who live in the metropolitan area could afford it, and next year it's worth 515,000, and maybe only 14% could afford it. But that's a localized issue in that if the value of housing in Edina is going up faster than general wages are going up, that's not necessarily a data point to do anything about. There may be a flood of people moving in to Edina because a Fortune 500 company is hiring a lot of high-income people. So when you say wages aren't keeping up, again, it's such a generalized statement. I don't think there's anything to do with it.
I think that's true, but I think it goes back to Janet's observation. Affordable housing and workforce housing are important to a thriving local economy. If Fairview Southdale has to make a decision about whether to expand its existing medical facility, one of the things they'll look at is how easy is it to get the people we need to staff this. If Edina no longer has any affordable housing for staffers, they recognize it's going to be more difficult to staff that facility, and they may choose to locate it in Bloomington instead because it's just easier to get people who are nearby to work in that facility. So we've been very fortunate that we have a community that has a tremendous amount of economic diversity and a very large base of employers. If we allow it to become a community that's exclusively for people who can afford the community, they're less attractive to businesses.
Yeah, I understand that the hypothesis. I just have not seen any data that says we need to spend as a city more money so that the employers can find employees. There doesn't seem to be a problem with finding employees, and if there is, then maybe the businesses have to pay some more money. And you might say, well, then they won't locate here because it costs too much to hire people here. But we don't, unless I'm missing something, we don't see that. We don't see that we are missing retailers. We don't see that we're missing restaurants. We seem to have them all, and the employers seem to be finding employees.
Yeah, but keep in mind that today we have 30% of our housing is affordable housing. So the fact that we have Southdale, the fact that we have the medical centers, the fact that we have Pentagon Park are all in part based on the fact that we have a very large base of people who can work in the community and afford to live in the community. If we change that, we may find that that dynamic no longer exists.
Well, we may or we may not. So the question would be, you know, we got to look at historical numbers and see how many affordable units we had in Edina and what the employment situation looks like. And as the affordable units changed, was there an impact on employment or number of jobs or businesses?
I would like to add something. In a regional context, you know, there are so many communities close to one another that there might be somebody in border communities to Edina that only have to go 10 minutes to get to work in Edina, and they live, you know, in another community. But what you tend to find when you get sort of larger geographic areas of higher end housing is it is harder for people that make the lower wages, like the people working in the retail service establishments, the medical centers, whatnot, to find housing close by. And so they might do transit, a lot of them drive, so that increases traffic in and out of the community. It increases pollution from that traffic. And it makes the lives of those people very, very busy and stressful because they're having to spend a lot of time going to work. And so it has a really negative impact on those people. It may not have a negative impact on the employer who's hiring those people because they don't care if they're driving and how long it's taking. So it's sort of a big picture. I mean, it's not just about how it impacts one side of the transaction. Bernadette,
I agree. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Although we had to quantify those things that you listed and lay them against the cost of doing something about it. So if I was to say, you know, there's a high cost to having people do this, but it's going to cost us $1 trillion to resolve it, you know, we might go, God, that's way too much money. So if you're gonna list things like that, then you have to quantify them and have a cost attached to them, and go to, and then look at how much that costs us and see, is it worth doing it?
I guess my take is, I think putting this in there from a goals perspective, I mean, what I hear us talking about is strategies and whether we should be investing and whether it's worthy. I mean, I think identifying where we are today, you know, the diversity of housing in this community and really providing data to that is an important component of this report, because I think there's a lot of perceptions. I think in the absence of data, everyone just kind of makes their own assumptions about what we are and what we aren't. And so I think this out as a graph, like, hey, this is what we are today. It doesn't mean that we need to intervene in any of this stuff. It might mean that it's just what we're just acknowledging, hey, this is what we have, and we might lose some of this through natural market forces because we can't afford being in some of the, like, it's just going to happen. And then, you know, these are the strategies that we can take to maintain or expand our affordable housing opportunities in the community. So to me, it's not so much that, you know, that just because we call it do something about it, it just means that we need to kind of provide a ground of why is this important? Why are we even talking about affordable housing? Because I think there's a component of people in Edina that say, Edina doesn't have affordable housing. It's all rich people and nice houses, and we don't necessarily want to add those people to our community. They're here. I mean, it's happening. It's in our community now. So, you know, we need to understand that, and then, you know, what is our objective going forward? So I think some of it is just kind of addressing the NIMBY attitude that, you know, we don't necessarily want, that people don't want it, and saying, you know what, we don't even understand, we haven't clearly defined what we are as a community today and why we're having this conversation, because it's here, and you know, we want to understand our strategy going forward. And it might be that we're going to do less related to affordable housing. I mean, there's all sorts of options that we have. We don't have to say, you know, we're going to do anything about any of this. But I think acknowledging the data is important.
I also think I agree completely, Bernadette, with what you said. And if we start from the premise that Edina is a great community today, right? It's a great place to live. We've all chosen personally to live here. And if we start with that and then look at this helped numbers that Steve presented of the diversity of housing helped create what we are today. So why wouldn't we want to maintain some of that or all of it or strengthen it? It's not, Edina has a reputation, and that reputation precedes this type of information. So I think communicating this and highlighting the existing diversity today, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but if we believe that it has helped led to what Edina is today, then that's a good thing.
I think that part of what was missing is that when we talk about aspirational goals of wanting to provide affordable housing and maintain what's existing, I think it would be helpful to also identify the data of what is the cost of an average additional unit of new affordable housing, and what would be the cost to maintain an existing housing unit that is considered to be affordable today. And some of these would need to be directly subsidized by the city budget, and then other parts might not be quite as visible, but I think it would be helpful to have that data in this section.
That data exists. Minnesota Housing Partnership and others have done extensive work in this field.
Is it applicable specifically to Edina?
Yeah, because wood and timber and labor for rehab or for creating new housing is pretty much the same metro-wide. Land is, of course, the variable. And we could make some adjustments, but we'd at least have some anecdotal or some regional data. The problem is will of the sellers of the NOAA property, whether or not they want to sell, A, B, how much they want to sell it for, because if they think they can make $18 million, you know, if they're going to try to sell a property for $50,000 per door, it's hard for any buyer without huge amounts of subsidy to keep affordable. And there have been situations in Edina where as soon as the seller found out that government was involved with buying, they chose another buyer that was actually bidding lower. So there's free will involved. And Bernadette, I mean,
are you talking about apartments? Because that's not true. I mean, I'm going to say right now, like with that if a person pays market rent, that does not mean that they're going to jack the rents or market price on the. I mean, we purchased 5 in Edina in the last 5 years, and we haven't the rents markedly at all, and we've done significant improvements. So
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that when we have tried that. In order to preserve NOAA property, 1, there has to be a property for sale. 2, it has to be for sale where those rent levels are able to be maintained. And 3, they have to be willing to sell when government is involved and be a patient.
No, you can preserve NOAA property without government intervention.
Well, yeah.
Have the government involved in it in order for it to change hands to another that's going to maintain it as it is. It doesn't, just because a property changes hands on the private market from a private party to a private party does not mean that it's not NOAA anymore.
Correct, but that's true with a single family house. But if for the purposes of this report and strategy, if you're coming up with strategies for the city to become involved preserving NOAA, I mean, yeah, the private market, I mean, that's true with single family homes too.
The city should be careful with their assessed values of these properties. I mean, that, you know, there's things that the city can do to maintain them as private rental property without getting involved with a subsidy and a program and a restriction, because then it's not NOAA anymore.
Right.
Subsidized unit. So if you want to maintain true NOAA apartments that are owned in the private market where the government, it doesn't cost the government, you know, time, energy, intervention, there are other strategies that can be maintained, that can be implemented that don't require direct financial participation or acquisition by the government. So, I mean, that we haven't drilled down into that area yet, but I mean, I could provide certainly significant examples of that are beyond just like the city buys it, sells it to a nonprofit. I mean, that's great. That should be one of the strategies, but that's not the only strategy.
Right.
That would be fabulous, Bernadette. If you can provide some examples, that would be terrific.
I'm happy to provide examples.
Great.
Well, I'm going to chime in terms of talking about a document that is going to be with us for a while, and the multi-housing units, we may have diversity, but in the single family home ownership for certain segments, I'm going to be just directing, say, African American in Medina. It's very, very limited. So for a document that is going to influence that and try to increase that, we need to be cognizant of that. So I know that the data is there to support that in the single family home in Medina for Black families, it's less than 2% or something like that. I would have to revisit my notes again where I read that, but that is something we need to be able to intentionally include our report, because it's going to be influencing what happens and how we move forward the next 20 years. So.
Bethany, can you add a note to look at data on household income trends in Edina versus the region? Hold on one moment. You guys can continue talking.
Tom, yeah, and then I think we've been meeting for 50 minutes and we're still on goal 1, so we may need to
move on.
Let me get this report done. We maybe need to move on, but Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to make 2 points. One is the development of additional affordable housing. It's also part of the environmental issue of trying to reduce commutes and the pollution that they come with. So I think that's one thing, because obviously your retailer, your medical center, and your office support staff, you know, that they are going to have to commute if the units aren't there. One of the issues I have with NOAA is, yes, the rent or the sales price may be within the affordable housing range, but there's no guarantee that the tenants are really of modest income. I mean, they may be people that, for a variety of reasons, just want a cheap rent because they have other priorities in their life. And so, to a degree, you need to have some units that are truly reserved for households of modest income. And I'm not slamming Noah. I mean, I think that's great because, again, you know, just like with cars, some of us want a brand new Mercedes and we can afford it, but there's others who can afford a brand new Mercedes, but they choose to drive a used Corolla. So I think those are a couple of things we need to acknowledge with the whole NOAA discussion, and then the need for additional units just from the environmental point of view.
Right. Do you all want, yeah?
I don't see typing happening in the document.
It is happening. I've been typing a lot.
Okay.
You're totally frozen.
No. I'm frozen. Okay. Yeah, I've seen a ton up to that point. I just wanted to make sure that we had in the notes. I think that's a good point to make in the report, is that the existence of a NOAA property isn't the same as someone living there that might meet the income threshold if it was provided.
So I'm wondering, you know, in the time that we have left, do we do this, or since this is on Google Docs, everyone could review it on their own and continue adding comments? Mine are in red. You can continue doing it like this if you want to add additional comments. And if we should go to the structure of the report, I'm a little concerned. It's September 23rd. We are starting to present in a month. Merritt, your hand is up, your screen is frozen.
Oh, okay, sorry. I just wanted to take 10 minutes to move to one or two of the later goals that I'm kind of struggling with. And then we move to the structure. So I can, if you can take us to the goals at the end, for instance, and I'll try not to talk too much since there's a chainsaw in the background. There is a goal related to trying to streamline city review processes and systems to make development easier.
Goal 9.
And I'm struggling with that one as a goal and a set of strategies because I'm guessing that the city generally does a very good job with that to date. And I want to hear more from the folks that did sort of those interviews and whatnot, what specifically, if they think this really is a problem area in Edina relative to other places, because there's always going to be places with problems.
This is goal 8, reduce building costs by streamlining the approval process for housing developments requiring a variance or subsidy. And Norm, this was your group that met a lot with builders.
So, Eric, so what is your question? Are you questioning whether this is appropriate to include? Is it valid based on the feedback that we got? What's the direction of your question?
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering if it's a big enough problem to highlight in the report, because, you know, these processes always take some time, and some of that is because of state mandates. Were you hearing something that led you to believe that it's more of a problem in Edina and therefore needs to be addressed?
The short answer is yes.
I agree.
I mean, specifically, that's what builders were articulating. Edina is more difficult to build in than other communities.
And a lot of it is based on some of the ad hoc requirements that are added late in the process.
Okay, so it would be, I want to provide sort of that case narrative for the setup for the goal in the report. So I don't know if those are quotes you got from developers or if there's some way to provide examples of those ad hoc processes. Because I just didn't, I wasn't privy to sort of where the case was made that this is an important goal. I totally respect that you did hear that maybe Edina is more challenging than other places. So
we need to, I guess we need to be able to tell that story and be able to articulate that story.
Yes, exactly.
I think this takes us a little bit back to the discussion of the overall structure. If we attempted to do, for goal 8, a full exposition of all the findings as a way to then lead into the strategies that are identified here, I think that's just going to be way down into the weeds. And it just feels like more detail that we need to provide. And in some cases, it may be hard to provide because we don't want to compromise the relatively few number of people that we talk to. So it makes me lean back towards saying we ought to have a structure that lists the goals at the end after we've made our narrative case for why we think work needs to be done, then list our goals and strategies, and hope that our beginning narrative provided enough information that people thought, yes, this is a serious problem. We need to do a number of different things. And they've done a nice job of providing a whole long list of things to do.
Whether it's a narrative in the beginning or with the goals and strategies at the end, or it's a narrative embedded within the goal, I personally would like to see this issue spelled out a little bit more, because I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't disagree with you based on, but for me, it's gut. And I think it's important that the others who are on a higher pay scale or more authority than I hear the story.
Yep, and I think that can be done in the initial narrative, but I don't think it requires this. It would seem like you're going to provide more detail if you do it goal by goal than if you build it into the initial narrative.
So Steve, what if we had maybe groups of things? So do these goals group into say the housing stock itself, the type of housing by price point and type, and then other goals are related to review and finance, so that we could have, cohesive narratives that relate to a subset of goals, as opposed to a long narrative that lays them out. I mean, we can do it both ways. I just kind of want to put that to you and others. Was there something about more closely associating the goals with the case setup and the data that people think is helpful, or should we stick with the original structure idea?
I like having this discussion up front because this is something the city has more control over. And we saw Bloomington as having a much more effective process. Also, I think the city has to face up to the amount of its own requirements, its cumbersome review process, redesigning the relationship between the city council and the planning commission. There's a whole set of issues that builders brought up. Granted, we only talked to maybe 3, but and there's a certain respect for their confidentiality because they don't want to it to come around and bite them. But if you tell some developer he has to go redesign his building, that's a lot of expense. Sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not. There's a lot of extra add-ons, as Norm pointed out, with the oh, I like this kind of facade, or underground parking. There's some pretty things to it, but is it necessary? And there's a cost associated. So while we get into maybe in the weeds further on in the document, I think we need to kind of bring this up as an issue to attract developers. I mean, some developers don't want to deal with a fussy government agency, but they'll deal with a government agency that is effective and businesslike. So
let me offer a counterpoint to that. Playing the devil's advocate. So I've moved to Edina because it's a beautiful community, great people, great amenities and services. And I don't want to see new development projects coming in that aren't of the highest quality. So as a resident, I want to be able to go to meetings. I want to be able to have an influence on the design or the types of developments that are selected. And I expect my council person to stand up for me against developers that just want to come here and make money. So I think that's very real, and usually in the communities that have cumbersome processes, that's what has driven the cumbersome process. And many residents think that's a benefit. So how do we articulate? I think the report has to articulate not only that it may be harder in Edina, but why is that a problem? If I think there's already too much development in Edina, why do I see it as a problem?
If you see it as a problem, that there's too much development, you probably wouldn't like any of this report. With a goal of 9 to 1,800 new affordable housing units, plus all the other market rates that we're pushing for based on the market study. I think the thing is that do we want to be competitive in the marketplace of developers? Do we want to attract really the developers that we want? And maybe, especially in the area of affordable housing or special needs housing, or kind of alternative housing arrangements. I think we need to think about that. I think we can convey our desires to have facades that are a good looking in a more streamlined manner. I mean, maybe if the city staff has a clear understanding of what the council wants, they can reach out to developers that would provide that, and that the city has the resources to help, at least in affordable housing, to have those facades. I mean, we already see that to a degree when you think of some of the common bond properties that were developed 30 years ago, and other affordable housing projects. Granted, they may be a little dated in their facade, but we all are after 30 or 40 years.
I'm sorry, I need to hop off. I have an 8:30 meeting, so I'll catch you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks, Bernadette.
Thank you, Bernadette.
When you think about process, if you have a very well-defined process, then you can accommodate the things that citizens might be looking for, which is quality housing and well-built housing, well-designed housing, housing or buildings that belong. But when you have a process that allows for so much individual input going back and forth, at the last step, changes are significant, it makes it really hard understand what to expect. And I think that's one of the things we heard consistently in these interviews was, you know, a developer would get down the road and think, oh my gosh, I can see the finish line. And then he'd get to the last meeting and it would be, we need to do this, and this, and then bring it back again. So it's having this well-defined, well-communicated process that would help developers develop projects in Edina. And I think so that when I participated in these interviews and synthesized the responses that they said, that's what stuck out to me.
Can you help me find, I was looking for that document where you guys had kind of written that up yesterday and I was having trouble finding it.
I'll look for it. I think I might have it.
Just send me a note today and make sure I have it. All right, this has been very helpful on this question. You know, we may want to consider, you might want to consider a strategy recommendation that Edina convene kind of a very short-term couple of conversations of a developer group that work with someone in confidence to kind of talk through these things and put together some specific recommendations.
And just as a heads up, I'm going to have to jump off here within the next 10 minutes too.
Okay.
Steve.
Going back to the overall structure of the document, it may be helpful if we could think about looking at goal 2, which is promote life cycle housing, and then say, do some of these other goals fit underneath that? It supports that overall goal. And I had identified 4, which is support missing middle housing production. And goal number 6, which is encourage housing to support and be supported by transit. Goal 7, which was about land use regulation. And we may actually be able to add 8 and 9 and just say that all of these things are clusters of strategies that work to support promoting life cycle housing. So that we don't have to have 10 different things. We may end up having maybe 4 very large goals, and then underneath that, we're going to try to put all of these sub-goals and strategies. Now, the difficulty is we've got a lot of information to cover. So I'm not sure that works, but it feels like we may be able to simplify the overall structure somewhat. Norm?
I support that. I think that grouping some of these together makes sense. But on the other hand, the goals that you mentioned, there's enough specific recommendations under those goals that are very, very different and address different things. So it might be a good idea to say, take a heading that includes 4 sub-goals, but keep those sub-goals as separate items underneath that overall heading.
Right.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, I've got one thing that's a little bit of a diversion, but Joe, since you're going to be jumping off, I'd like to throw out something really briefly. We've talked about community engagement. That's important. I don't think we have a good idea of what that community engagement ought to look like. And we're running out of time in these meetings. So what I would like to propose is that a couple of us, or how many people are interested, have a separate meeting offline with MJ, maybe, and Stephanie and Merritt, if you would like, up with a recommendation of what the community engagement process ought to look like. Would that meet with everybody's approval?
So, Norm, I think community engagement is critical. And I spoke with Stephanie after last week's meeting and expressed my opinion that there's so much knowledge and experience in this committee or task force, and it would be I think we should move forward with the community survey. And one of MJ's questions was, well, how's it going to impact your report? And I don't know that it needs to impact this report. It needs to be presented as community engagement based upon this report and could help the council make policy. But I think that having this group help develop that report, given how many months has it been that we've been working on this, and using that knowledge and experience to generate that survey would be a really good idea.
I think this does require further discussion with MJ, because I think there is a way. You don't want to invalidate the survey and affect community trust if you are asking something that could lead to a policy recommendation that the city council is going to want to go again and get community input, because we've already went through this. Why are you doing it again? So there's already an established kind of process for how this council gets, when they choose and when they want to get community input. So you don't want to do a double, ask the same questions twice, because it really strongly affects community trust. A second issue that was brought up was that it would be one option if it doesn't have to, if it's based off the experience and the direction moving forward based on your 18 months of work on this, is incorporate 3 or 4 questions in the citywide quality of life survey that's going to be going out next year, that residents, not everyone gets it, it's a survey, but residents have somewhat come to expect, and that the city council really does use that to help guide policy. And that is like the main outreach tool that they use. So having this group come up with 3 or 4 questions to be part of that survey.
And we talked about this, Stephanie, but my response to that is this issue is far too large for simply 3 or 4 questions as part of something else. I mean, we've got, just as one example, we got a piece of property that the city has been sitting on for over 10 years.
Yes, they have.
And done nothing with. So I think it's just such a big issue that it requires more than 3 or 4 questions as part of the quality of life survey. That is, frankly, too narrowly, this is my opinion, too narrowly sent out. That quality of life survey should be broadened significantly.
Okay, so even if it's a separate survey, I think one of the recommendations would be that there are large topical issues in this report for which we believe there needs to be broader community input. And we recommend a community-wide survey to help the council guide policy regarding your laundry list.
To help the council guide policy on housing in Edina.
Housing in Edina, specifically these issues. Yeah. So my point is that because there was concern about the timeline, we didn't know what you wanted to survey early enough. Now we're getting to the point where you're getting to drill down on what you want surveyed, but the time is an issue. So if it doesn't need to necessarily impact the outcome of the report, it can be something that happens after the report, but you can come up with the questions and maybe even have some of the questions in the report. Like one of your strategies or one of your tools is developing a survey to address housing, but these specific housing policy issues.
Yep.
Exactly.
I think that can be included. Just completing it during an election year when everyone's being surveyed to death and their phones are going off the hook with, everyone under the sun regarding the election, I just think is challenging. And that you don't want to affect community trust by, why I answered a survey and you didn't include it.
Yep.
You didn't include what I wanted.
Well, that's always going to exist. You're never going to satisfy everybody all the time. But the purpose of the survey would be to hear what the community is thinking, and then pull that into. You can easily communicate back the results of the survey, so people's voices are heard. They may not be. You may not do exactly what everyone wants. You never will. But people have to understand that's life. And that has nothing to do with, in my view, trust in the administration. That would be an easy excuse if you said, well, I told you what I wanted and you said you weren't going to do it.
Joe,
That's not
you
trust.
would not believe how often we hear that, though.
Yeah.
At city council meetings.
And
the council members hear this a lot.
Well, it's part of their job, I guess. Might not be the fun part, but it's part of their job.
Before taking up any more time of this discussion of the whole group, my original recommendation was a small group of us meet offline with MJ, with Stephanie and Merritt, if you're interested, to talk about the whole range of opportunities for community engagement and come up with a recommendation for the whole task force. Is that something that's a reasonable recommendation?
Sure.
Who would like to be a participant in that?
Norm, say that again.
We have a small group with MJ to come up with a recommendation of the whole spectrum of community engagement, not necessarily only a survey, the survey being possibly a part of that, the alternatives discussed. Who would like to be part of that discussion?
I would.
Is that Dan?
Yes.
Joe, it sounds like you probably would want to be part of that too.
Oh, Merritt, I don't know if I have time to be. I would love to be a part of it, but I'm so crunched for time right now that I think I would like to be involved, but I don't know that I can commit to the amount of time it would take.
You know what I could do is find a time with some of you, just invite all of you, and those who can attend, if it works for your schedule.
Steve, did you have a comment?
I was just raising my hand to volunteer.
Okay.
Yeah, and Bernadette jumped off, and so maybe if it's a 45-minute call, I would include all of you, and if you can, you can.
Okay, Stephanie, do you want to arrange that? Stephanie?
Yeah.
do you want to take the lead in pulling that meeting together?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
We've lost a couple people, so I'm wondering if we should wrap up at 8:30 today. Or if there are other things you guys would like to spend the time discussing, like going through more of the goals or talking about the structure more.
Merritt, since there's still a number of us that are still on the line yet, can you give us your view of what you need and how the format that the rest of the document should take?
Well, the rationale statements, things you've put in here have been really helpful. So if you have additional thoughts, I welcome those. Anyone that didn't have a chance to participate in that yet, I think that's Joe and Dan. Really like to see you add statements there. I think as a task force, we're going to have to come to terms with how much data we have in it and the fact that we can't prove every single point we make. And so if there's data that you think is absolutely essential that we use to convey or to make the case for these goals, then I ask that you write that associated with the goal. And there may be certain data that just isn't available or would be very staff intensive to put together. But perhaps it's data that you think is important and that you'd like to see the city track in the future, then maybe one of the strategies is that the city starts to track certain things so that it has a better handle on them. I think that's primarily it right now. We're meeting again in a week, so based on the conversation today of maybe consolidating some of the goals together, I'm going to look at that, and specifically I'm going to think about the type of data and context that each goal has and which of the goals really share that same data and context setup, because that probably shows what the natural groupings would be.
Merritt, we didn't talk about your latest draft number 3. And can you make some comments about your thoughts about that draft, how it needs to continue to evolve, and what input you need from us on that?
Well, that was a test draft of doing a moving the report to being a goal, that each section would be based on a goal, and so for each goal you'd provide background information, data, and what's recommended. I think it sounds like so far on this call that there might be concern that there would be too much context and data for each goal, and that it could become disjointed from painting sort of an overall picture at the beginning of the report of the state of housing in Edina, and that the group maybe is more compelled to go back to that. When I had structured that chapter, what I had in mind is you want a report that people really clearly understand what's in the report, where they find it, and how it relates to each other. So if we were going to do, for instance, goal-based chapters, you want a consistent format. So you have some background information, and then you have some data, and then you have your goal statements, and then you have your strategies, and then tools, for instance. So I was trying to get at what would be sort of the core information that you want in a report related to each goal. And then we can move that around and combine it as we wish. So that's what I was testing.
Merritt, great test. Thank you.
Merritt, this is Tom Kuhn. I have a couple questions about communication. One, if we send you emails in between, is that appropriate? and to get a response. One thing I'm confused about was earlier in the draft of the report, you wanted me to provide some data on education or Edina Public Schools. Now, I sent you what I had received from the schools. Did you want me to write up a paragraph or a summary or my take on what that information tells us? I was just a little confused by some information that I got earlier from you. And so I'm also asking about communication in between these meetings. What's appropriate?
I have the ability to respond to things. I might not do it within the next day or two, but certainly can send out responses within a few days at the latest. Yeah, on that education stuff, I think it would be helpful for you to state what you think the point of the information is that's relevant to the report. So, and that's true for anybody. Why would you want certain information in the report? How does it help make the case?
Well, I mean, yeah, okay, I can do that. I was just confused about that. So, okay. And I will copy Stephanie too. Should I copy the whole group or just you and Stephanie? You got to unmute.
Yeah, how about just the two of us only, in that it will be reflected. The rest of the group can see it and the draft. And you have all been inundated with emails, and I think after a while it gets to be just noise. And so the important ones don't get looked at because there's too many other ones.
Okay. Okay. Well, I was just looking for some clarification because, you know, there's procedure and contracts and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yes. Yeah, if I'm having an issue with too much of something, then I'll let Stephanie know and she can communicate that back to the group what the expectations would be.
Well, I work better in Word than I do in Google Docs. I don't understand it as much. And unfortunately, we can't do a tutorial one-on-one. So
that's something I did. And I think somebody mentioned this to Stephanie and found it confusing. What I've been doing recently is when I have a document that you all might be working in, I put it in that shared drive in a Google Doc version, which is preferred because it's, you know, people can edit simultaneously. But I also put it in there in a Word version. So you can tell the documents that are Word have a W and the documents have lines, or Google Docs. So if you see two document names, those symbols should be different, and then you can pick which format you want to work in, and then I can consolidate it across those two. Now, I don't know if everybody is able to get at the documents in the shared drive, like Norm. Is that something you've been struggling to get access to?
I particularly haven't had any problems getting access to it, but having said that, I prefer working in a draft version in Word and then transferring my comments when they're more complete over into the Google Docs. But that's just my preferred way of operating.
Yeah, so what Mary was talking about, I shared the screen. So these little W's mean that it's a Word doc, and these lines mean that it's a Google Doc. You can see where my cursor is.
Thank you.
Most of the stuff I worked on today was in the Google Doc. It was an editing format, so it was on here. And then up in here, once it loads up, it said editing, and that's where I worked up right there. So that's what I worked off today was the Google Doc, but they're in both.
And that Google Doc was fine to work with. It was much easier to do it this way rather than doing the bubbles alongside the text. So it's great to be able to type directly into the document.
Yep.
Comment, Steve, I agree.
And the other thing is, Merritt, if we're going to have two different documents as input, could we set a protocol that says everybody has to get their input in by 24 hours before our meeting, and then you consolidate it and send out the consolidated version before the meeting?
Yes, that's a great idea.
Try.
Yeah, I know that's got to be frustrating, but we were seeing this document in its entirety for the first time this morning, and it's kind of hard, especially when somebody else controls the cursor. Now you're moving it around up and down.
I know, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, you're right, because some of the comments came in at 10 o'clock last night, and so Merritt was up at 5 this morning, making sure they're all reflected in one doc.
Thank you.
So I think that's a great protocol. I also have moved us, and maybe not clearly articulated this, that I want people always to be working on the document that is in the folder for the upcoming meeting. So that after we close down this meeting, by the end of the day, I'll create a new folder for the next meeting, and things that you'll be working on will be in that folder. So we won't use working docs anymore, or track versions. That way you always know which one you're working in. And I think, but sometimes some of you like to go back and see previous versions. Is that correct?
Sure.
I guess the other thing I was wondering about is the original draft or the earliest draft. I made a lot of comments and I didn't know if they got incorporated. I saw check marks. I didn't understand what all that meant. I know some of it was picky and some of it was just adding phrases here and there, or expanding a definition here and there. How that got incorporated, or if it's acknowledged, does that mean it's accepted, or is it rejected, or is it modified? I just kind of get confused by the whole process. So I guess I'm just, I'm not saying there's a better way to do it. It's just confusing for me.
Right. So you're wanting an explanation of what happened for each of them.
Right. I mean, I don't always expect my comments to be accepted, but okay, what happened to them?
Yeah. Okay. That is something I can do in the Google Doc version. So if I bring all the comments, I may be able to do it in Word too, but I think it's easier in Google Docs because you can comment, and then you can look at those. So it'll be a lot of comments, but I can try to be doing that.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, Tom, just for your information, I know Stephanie, you commented about being overwhelmed by emails. I always am. I find that your comments in particular are always interesting, and you reflect the view that maybe I might not have thought about. So I would welcome, comments and emails that you're sending. I would welcome copies being sent over my way too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. How about
all right.
other items, thoughts people want to bring up?
So homework next week is, Merritt, you're going to use the format that you have in the meeting materials, the chapter outline that you did before, but you're going to condense some of the goal topic areas, still have topics underneath, but you're going to start out with community drivers and all the background, executive summary type information. But when it gets to goal area, condense those. At the end, I still think we'll have a table that has it all on one page. goals and strategies like on one page, and it may even be like one of the early spreadsheets that Merritt included a long time ago. If we get to tactics or tools, now to keep in mind that was not part of the charge. So if we don't get there, it's not that we have fallen short of our charge. We were just overworking our charge. And when we met with Staunton, he said, I didn't ask for tools. That doesn't need to happen. I need strategies. So considering months before we need to have a baked draft. So I think that's how it will be. That will be the next step is still people supplying their comments, their narrative, their insight, their data. But you're going to work on some restructuring before next week, right? So there's not a ton of homework?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to say one thing, though, about some of what Stephanie brought up about the tools and stuff. I think some of that could be put in an appendix. It doesn't mean we have to defend, explain every tool. But if this is a 10-year document and somebody picks it up in 6 years from now who becomes a city council member and maybe their expertise is in fine arts, to slam fine art people, they can find a lot of information within this document. Like they could say, oh, well, maybe we should have tax exempt bond financing because interest or anything like that. It might not be something we want to do today with this council and these interest rates, but it's a 10-year document. And
for sure, Tom, and I didn't mean we're going to get rid of any of the tools we have. What I meant was in the, and so I'm being a visual person, in the beginning, Merritt had these very large tables that were awesome. But by each strategy, she had a column that said tools. And what I'm saying is that we don't need to fill up each one of those columns for each strategy to have a corresponding tool. The tools that have already been defined by the task force and the group, yes, of course, I think we include those.
Okay, well, I guess we're thinking in different terms.
I'm thinking visually, and you guys can't see the table that's in my head.
But I like those. I liked everything together, and maybe I'm responsible for promoting that idea. So everybody's got a different way of looking at these things.
So our two main homework assignments are continue providing commentary on the goals in terms of what rationale we have for that goal, and then any comments we have on structure. Is that correct?
Yes.
Stephanie, do we have a meeting scheduled for next Wednesday?
Yes.
Whether or not I have sent out the meeting, we do. No, did we?
We should.
That would have been on our normal schedule.
Okay. I haven't sent out the WebEx yet, so I will do that.
Okay. Merritt, question for you. Keeping in mind that we're getting down to a short end of the schedule, I don't have a good understanding of what is going to happen week by week between now and when we want to have the report prepared. Could you put together a timeline of what you expect to have accomplished week by week for the next month until we get this report completed?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and the rationale document is helpful. I think something I struggled with is when I started to get comments, you put some narrative in there as sort of construct and tone, I totally get changing tone or whatever, but there are going to be certain things that are said that don't have hard data. And Dan, for instance, really struggles with, a statement like, diversity is what diversity is a real strength of the city of Edina. And then the question might be like, well, what kind of diversity and who says that's a strength? And that's where then I get kind of tangled up and bogged down because I don't know, how much do I really need to be defending certain statements or how much are just kind of general statements that most people would understand and have fine in the setup. And so that's why your rationale pieces help. But we do get bogged down when we say, go back to lengthy debates about whether we really should be supporting new affordable housing. And so I think part of the challenge is figuring out if there are no points of disagreement around what's important that's being recommended in the report. And maybe figuring out some way to get those resolved so we're not doing that too much in the meetings. Do you know what I mean?
This is Dan. I understand what you mean.
Oh, you are here. Hi.
Yes. No, I'm here. So for my part, I will be a little more exacting. Just try to make it easier on you to respond to things, not ask open-ended questions.
Right. That's perfect. Right. Or just say it. Like if you don't agree with a goal, and you think there should be discussion, then we should get that on the table right away, so that we can resolve any areas where maybe the task force has quite a bit of disagreement about something or strategies. But it's really helpful when everyone takes the shot at saying, if you were writing the report and you knew this goal was going to be in there, what would you say to people to articulate why this goal is important?
I'm about to board the plane, so I'm going to go, but thank you.
Okay. Have fun.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for being on during airport finagles.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was pretty fast.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye, thanks. Well, he went from leaving the house to getting on the airplane really quickly. But I don't know.
That's Edina.
True. So I don't know if you guys sense some outstanding issues out there that maybe have to be hammered out a bit more.
Well, I think we should be careful. We went through a very extended fist to five process. And in that process, we may have left some people behind on a particular goal. But if it was agreed by the majority that we should move forward and include it, then that should be viewed as a decision made by the group through the fist to five process. And while you may find it useful to have some commentary from the people who dissented, that's great, and no reason not to gather that. I don't think we should say, well, it's time to have another full fist to five discussion on each of the 9 goals or 10 goals.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to.
We're not going to recalculate whether or not it's going to go in. Is your point too?
Right, and then I think that's something then that you as task force members have to be putting out there as a norm, as opposed to say me and Stephanie saying we shall not discuss whether these are in here anymore or why. I think it's better if the group is agreeing on that. Or do you think otherwise? Do you think that is the role?
I'm more than comfortable saying, hey, we went through this whole evaluating process and it was determined that this was in, or it was determined that this was out, and we can't go back 3 months.
Yep.
Tom, you're on mute. I'll unmute you. There you go. You're unmuted.
I may have missed something, like brought the tear downs. that was a discussion for a while. Did that? So, saying we reopen it, it's just, did I miss something?
Right. Not a particular one that I don't know. To look back.
And I think we talked about sustainability, environmental, that sort of. We did. I mean, there is some discussion on that, but.
Yeah, we have a goal number 10 that says encourage sustainable design and technology in all new housing. So that was agreed by the group.
Okay. Well, let me plow through as much as I can this week. And as questions are coming up, if there's a part of the report that I'm feeling like don't have quite enough to articulate why something is being recommended, then I will flag that in the report as something that I might ask for more help on.
That'd be great.
Barrett, feel free to send out immediate emails because I think everybody is got other things going on, and so we'll need to be able to have a little flexibility in how quickly we can respond. So if you can just send that out to us immediately rather than just flagging it in the Google Docs, that would be good.
Oh, I see. Like send questions. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, I will at least compile them over the course of a day instead of sending 5.
Yeah, that's fine. But I think, as Norma said, anything that you and Stephanie send, I think gets read. So
yeah,
send it out to us. We're happy to read it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you all.
I just sent you a WebEx invitation. So keep it, accept it, keep it. If I have to forward it, it doesn't work for you guys getting on. It becomes a much harder process.
Great.
So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Have a good week.
Thank you, everybody. Good seeing you.
Bye.
Bye.